Let's take a dive into the NHL stock market. I'll tell you who to buy, sell, and which stocks you should hold on to. Coming up next. Yo-ho everybody, and welcome to another edition of Yinzer on Hockey. Before we begin, make sure you go down below, click that like button, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click that little bell so you stay up to date on all the off-season happenings. So today I want to do something a little bit different. I want to go through each team in the NHL and look at where I think they'll be 3 years from now, and whether you should buy stock in this team, sell the team, or hold on to them for, to see it. Maybe wait a little bit longer to see where they're going to be in the future. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I'm just going to do these in alphabetical order. And again, this is where I see them in 3 or 4 years in relations to like where they'll be in the playoff picture or whether they'll be a contending team. And that was kind of the basis of how I looked at each one of these. So start off at the top at the Anaheim Ducks. And for me, this is a sell. I think the core of their roster is aging, and in 3 years' time are probably going to be well beyond their prime. Physically, they're already starting to break down. You see the injuries with Ryan Kessler piling up, and Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf are losing a step. So I think this team's going to be a sell for me. Next up is the Arizona Coyotes. For me, this is a buy. I think they are... You saw the trend towards the end of last year where they started to get a lot more competitive down the stretch. I think Antti Raanta is a great goaltender. He's going to keep them in a lot of games. Bringing in Galchenyuk to add some scoring punch. Locking up Ekman-Larsson to a long-term deal. Everything points to Arizona only getting better from here. Next up is the Boston Bruins. For me, this is a hold. Probably going to see Zdeno Chara retire in the next year or so, but they do have a lot of really good young defensemen that's going to kind of step up and fill that role. The forward group is pretty good. They lost some scoring this offseason. Bergeron, his health has been a factor the last couple of years. We'll see how well he rebounds from his injuries. Marchand is always a wild card. You're going to get his production, but you're also going to get the other side of Brad Marchand, so you never know really what to expect. But for me, I'm holding Boston. I still think they're going to be a very competitive team in 3 years. Buffalo Sabres, this is a no-brainer. This team is a buy right now. They are 100% looking to the future, and they have a good core already starting to be established with Dahlin and Jack Eichel, Reinhart. They brought in Jeff Skinner. Maybe they can convince him to re-sign a long-term deal and keep him there for a little while longer, and that's a great core for them, and I'm buying Buffalo. Calgary Flames, I'm also buying this team. I think Bill Peters is going to come up there, put in a good system for those guys to be successful. Monahan is one of the better two-way centers in the game. Johnny Gaudreau is a phenomenal talent. And then you bring in Noah Hannafin, who's a great young defender. And I think all signs are pointing to Calgary heading in the right direction. Chicago Blackhawks, for me, this is a sell. This is a team that's been kind of tried to hold on to Old Glory for a little bit too long. And I think you kind of see a decline already in Jonathan Toews a little bit. That's not to say he doesn't have the potential to bounce back. He does. But Duncan Keith is getting older. Seabrook, their defense is starting to get a lot older. You've had questions for the past couple of years with Corey Crawford's health. So for me, I'm selling Chicago. Next up is Colorado Avalanche. For me, this is a buy as well. And bringing in Grubauer from Washington was one of the less noticeable moves of the offseason, but it might go as one of the more underrated moves of this offseason. You've had injury concerns with Varlamov in the past, so bringing in a surefire backup whenever he gets hurt, you'll have that. And Nathan McKinnon had a MVP caliber season last year. He's going to continue to grow and develop. He's still one of the better young talents in the league. And everything about Colorado is pointing in the right direction. That being said, I do look for them to take a small step back this year, regroup a little bit, and then for the next couple of years they'll come back to, that max potential. Next up is the Columbus Blue Jackets. For me, this is a hold. Bobrovsky is one of the better goaltenders in the league. He's always in the Vezina conversation. He's a very talented goaltender, but just seems to lose his way in the playoffs. Pierre-Luc Dubois is a phenomenally talented center iceman. Everybody thought that was a reach in the draft, and now Columbus is just kind of laughing and reaping the benefits of that draft pick. So, and the reason this is more of a hold for me is waiting out the Artemi Panarin situation a little bit. But for me, I like the outlook, but I'm holding until I see what Panarin decides to do. Dallas Stars, for me, this is a sell. Ben Bishop's health is a never-ending concern. The Tyler Seguin contract situation right now, a lot of that team is they're kind of in a transitional phase a little bit between age and youth, so they're kind of stuck in that middle spot right now. But I do look for them to probably have to go into maybe not a full-sell rebuild, but they'll definitely have to bring some talent in to balance that roster back out. For me, I'm selling Dallas. Detroit Red Wings, I am buying Detroit. Maybe not this year and maybe not next year, but this is a team that is starting to get the pieces in place. They have a lot of cap coming off of their salary cap next year. It's going to free them up to be competitors in the free agent market and help build around these young guys. Dylan Larkin, Joey Veleno, Philip Zadina, all these young guys coming in, very talented, and I am buying the future for Detroit. Edmonton Oilers. This is one I am so torn on this decision. I'm going to hold on the Edmonton Oilers. I think they have a lot to do to retool their defense, and also they still have to find some scoring help for Connor McDavid. I think eventually, if you ride a one-trick pony all the time, eventually teams are just going to key him, and I don't know if Connor McDavid can still score 110 points when all five guys on the ice are only watching him. So we'll see how that goes. Florida Panthers, I'm buying Florida Panthers. With a caveat, they are going to have to replenish their goaltending depth eventually, but a lot of that young talent they have in Florida is coming of age. You bring in a guy who likes to score goals like a Mike Hoffman. You put him beside Barkov, who I think is starting to get noticed, at least in the smaller circles, as one of the better two-way defensemen or one of the better two-way center icemen in the NHL, and he'll continue to grow into that. Going to be a perennial Selke candidate when it's all said and done. Los Angeles Kings, I'm selling the Los Angeles Kings. I love Jonathan Quick. I think he is one of the best goaltenders, if not the best goaltender in the NHL right now. And he keeps them in games. He kept them in the Vegas series last year, and that was the only reason. They have no scoring. I don't know if Kovalchuk comes in and immediately gives them 35 or 40 goals. To me, being away from the NHL and the speed that the NHL is played at right now, I'm pegging him for more of a 20 to 25 guy, maybe 30, if the cards fall right for him. But outside of that, there's just not a lot of spark to look forward to in Los Angeles, and Kovalchuk's going to be 38 years old in 3 years, so he can't carry him for that long. I'm selling Los Angeles. Minnesota Wild, I'm also selling the Minnesota Wild. They did make a lot of moves this offseason, but none of them were spectacular. and they're still in a weird salary cap situation. Matt Dumba is one of the better defensemen in the league for sure, and Ryan Suter is a very talented defenseman, but his health has started to become a concern. Parise's health is becoming a concern as well. So we'll have to see where they go to replenish the youth back into that organization. Montreal Canadiens, this is a sell for me 100%. Obviously, with the concern for Pacioretty's future, the lack of an NHL-ready center iceman on their roster, the defense is still suspect. Shea Weber has been nothing but one visit to the ER room after another since he got to Montreal. I'm selling Montreal. Nashville, I'm holding on to Nashville only with the caveat that Saros does become an elite starting goaltender. I think he has that potential to be an elite starting goaltender, but Pekka Rinne is 35 years old. He may not even get another contract in Nashville after this season. So, that's the big caveat. Obviously, the defensive core is great. Locking up Ryan Ellis to the long-term deal that they just signed with him, great deal for the team. And but I'm holding them. I think they're still going to be a pretty viable contender. New Jersey Devils, buying for sure. This is a young team, lots of young talent. Taylor Hall is phenomenal. I think Hirschier is going to grow into a very talented center iceman as he continues to grow and mature. They have probably the best 1-2 punch at goaltending now. I mean, obviously the Nashville one is one to consider as well, but New Jersey, very talented at goaltender with Kincaid and Schneider, both when they're playing as well as they can be, is a very talented duo. New York Islanders, this one's a bit of a surprise, but I'm going to buy the New York Islanders. I think that this rebuild is going to be very short-lived. They have Barzal, Anders Lee, Bailey's locked up long-term. They do need to find a solid number one goaltender. I don't think Robin Lehner is the answer for them there, but they find a goaltender, and they're probably going to be back in contention. I don't look for this rebuild to take very long. I don't think they're a great team this year. Probably 6th or 7th in the Metro, but their rebuild will happen pretty quickly. New York Rangers, I am selling. I think that they are still in the beginning phases of this rebuild. Buchnevich and guys like that are young and up and coming are really going to help speed along this rebuild, but then you have the issue that Henrik Lundqvist is definitely in the back half of his career. He's probably going to be gone in 2 to 3 years, so that's something they have to consider. How good is Matt Zuccarello going to look in a couple of years? All these questions are going to need answered for the Rangers, and I don't think they're going to be answered in the next 3 years, so I am selling the New York Rangers. Ottawa Senators, I am selling. This is a train wreck that is still in the beginning phases of happenings. Like, part of the train is still on the track, so most of us are still speculating and quite confidently speculating that Erik Karlsson is not going to be with the Ottawa Senators when the puck drops on October 3rd. So we all have that to look forward to, and then you have to find a new franchise guy. Brady Tkachuk coming in and signing right away with the Ottawa Senators can help speed this along, but I still think they're a few years away from even getting deep into the rebuild. Also, not having their first-round draft pick next year is also going to hurt and set your rebuild back even further. Next up is the Philadelphia Flyers. I am buying this team 100%. This team is going to be a force in the Eastern Conference within the next 2 to 3 years. Their defensive core, young, talented. Provorov, Gostisbehere, top pairing is one of the better young defensive pairings in the league. Couturier, Nolan Patrick, those young guys like that. And Giroux is still pretty young in his own right as well, so everything about Philadelphia is pointing in the right direction. The only question mark that most people have is goaltending, and they have a goaltender coming up the pipe. His name is Carter Hart. He is going to be the saving grace for Philadelphia whenever he finally gets there. Everything about watching his junior career so far says that he is going to be an elite NHL goaltender given time. Pittsburgh Penguins, I am holding on the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're an older team already. Crosby just turned 31. Malkin's 32. Letang's 32. Kessel's 31. Hornquist is 32. So, that core group is definitely in the second half of their careers. All still performing at a very high level, which is why I think in 3 years, I don't think their Stanley Cup window is closing in 3 years, but I think in 3 years their window is starting to close. And that's why I'm holding them, as well as the health issues with Letang and Malkin has always been a concern. Next up, the San Jose Sharks. I am selling the San Jose Sharks, and I think they are kind of they've been rebuilding on the fly for a few years. Obviously finished second in the Pacific last year, or third in the Pacific last year. So they're still a playoff team, and they're probably still going to be a competitive team in 3 years. There's not going to be a Joe Thornton there anymore. How reliable is Martin Jones? And everything else that's starting to take shape. Evander Kane, can he perform to that level over and over again? We saw a little bit of a drop-off in Brent Burns' production last year, so maybe he's starting to tail off a little bit too. It's just I don't have a real good read on San Jose right now, but I don't think their window is closed in 3 years, but I don't know that they're going to be a Stanley Cup contender in 3 years. I do think they have another year or so where they are legitimately in the top 8 to 10 teams that you're going to talk about for a Stanley Cup. Next up is the St. Louis Blues. I'm buying St. Louis. I think the way they retooled their roster this offseason was phenomenal. They added center depth when they didn't have really any quality centers. Now they have 3 very good centers at the top end of their lineup. Their defense is very good. The structure of the team is very good. The way they play defense as a team, as a unit, is very good. Jake Allen, still a very talented goaltender. They lost their backup in Carter Hutton. He moved on to Buffalo, so maybe they lose a little bit there, but I think they'll be all right. Tampa Bay, I'm still buying Tampa Bay. The core of this roster is still very, very young. Stamkos, Kucherov, Hedman, those guys are still pretty young. They do have a few veteran guys that are going to fizzle out, but, they did... They got Callahan. They locked up McDonough for a few years this offseason, so everything's shaping in the right direction for Tampa. Toronto, I'm a little bit torn on Toronto. I want to hold Toronto. And the reason I want to hold Toronto is I want to see what kind of magic tricks Cal Dubas has up his sleeve when it comes to getting Nylander, Austin Matthews, and Mitch Marner all under contract when their affordable deals run out. I think Matthews and Marner are both restricted free agents after next year. Seeing how they structure these contracts, Nylander's a restricted free agent right now, so seeing how they structure these contracts and the fact that they still have to rebuild their defense, and it's probably going to be from the ground up because Gardner's probably going to have to go in order to supplement these contracts. So seeing how they build their defense is going to be key for whether or not I'm buying Toronto as a legitimate perennial Stanley Cup contender. I think they're a contender right now, and they'll be in the Stanley Cup conversation for sure this year. But with that defense, I'm curious to see where they're at in 3 years. Vancouver, I'm buying Vancouver. Brock Besser, Horvat, Quinn Hughes, all these guys, very talented individuals, coming in, injecting that youth back into Vancouver's lineup. Obviously, you're going to have to find out who your leaders are now that the Sedins are gone. Get a little bit of help with your goaltending situation, but for the most part, I think Vancouver's heading in the right direction. Vegas Golden Knights, I am selling the Vegas Golden Knights. And the reason I'm selling the Vegas Golden Knights is because all these players from last year that had career years, I would rather see. I wouldn't say I would rather see. I need to see them do this on a perennial basis, and I don't think that is sustainable. Not from every player on the roster. Sure, Marcia Show's still going to be putting up a ton of points. I think William Karlsson's probably going to level off to a 30 to 35 goal scorer consistently. Riley Smith is still very good. But again, that's your whole first line. Where are you finding the depth scoring? Does the Tatar trade pay off? Plus you have Marc-Andre Fleury, who's had concussion issues in the past, and he's only on a 3-year contract. So, finding out, where they're at in 3 years is curious to me, but I'm going to sell for right now. Washington Capitals, I'm holding on the Washington Capitals. Their core is still in place and still locked up for the next foreseeable future. Backstrom, Kuznetsov, Ovechkin, those guys are always going to give you a chance. Oshie is very dangerous as a second-line winger. Holtby is such an enigma. Obviously, last year, through the second half of the regular season, I think most Capitals fans were ready to just cut the cord and let him walk, and they didn't want him on their roster. But after the playoffs last year, did he regain that confidence? Is he comfortable now being the starting guy without a Philip Grubauer behind him as a bit of a safety net, if you will? So we'll see where they're at in 3 years. But right now, I'm just holding on the Washington Capitals. Winnipeg Jets, this is a buy for sure. Connor Hellebuyck, exciting young goaltender. Patrick Laine is the next. He is the currently establishing generation. Patrick Laine is the Alexander Ovechkin, I think, of that group. The McDavid Matthews era. He's going to be their Ovechkin. He's going to be the goal scorer. Scheifele is very, very talented. Blake Wheeler is, in my estimation, one of the most underrated players in the NHL. Byfuglien, very good defenseman. I like the direction that Winnipeg is heading, and I think they're going to be a perennial contender for years to come. So that's how I envision each of the teams over the next couple of years. So let me know down in the comments below, which teams do you look for to be contenders in 3 years? Which teams do you think are going to fall off, and which teams do you kind of think are going to look mostly the same in 3 years? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Follow me on all the social media listed in the description below. And until I see you next time, have a good day.